math Olympiad problem. I'm a student at Brooklyn Tech, one of the best high schools in the United States, and you can find my profile at Bari Science Lab / Rifat Albert Bari. So let's get started on our math Olympiad problem. Show that 1 over h sub a is less than 1 over h sub b plus 1 over h sub c if h sub a, h sub b and h sub c are the altitudes of our triangle. Okay, so what does the question ask us? Well, we are asked to show that this inequality is true. 1 over the first altitude is less than the sum of 1 over the second and third altitude. But how can we show that this is true? Well, when you see an inequality like this, a is less than b plus c, and you see geometry like a triangle, the first thing I would think of is the triangle inequality theorem. And what the triangle inequality theorem states is that the sum of any two sides is greater than the third. So let's draw a triangle so I can illustrate this. Let's call our sides A, B and C. So what the triangle inequality theorem is saying is that the sum of any two sides will be greater than the third. But how can we apply this to the altitude of the triangle? Well, first of all, let me show you what I mean by altitude. Altitude is a line from the vertex of a triangle that is perpendicular to the opposite side. So if we call this h sub a, altitude from vertex A, and we call this h sub b, the altitude from vertex B, and h sub c, the altitude from vertex C, then what we have to prove is that altitude A, 1 over altitude A, is less than the sum of 1 over altitude B plus 1 over altitude C. So how can we do that? Well, one of the things you can do is, since we have altitude and since we have sides, we can relate the altitude to the side using the area formula. If you know the area formula of a triangle, you will know that the area of a triangle is equal to half BH, where B is the base and H is the height. So let's try this formula out. We know that half, let's use the first base, half of base A times altitude A is equal to half of base B times altitude B is equal to half C, half of side C times altitude C. Why is this true? Well, because the area of a triangle is always the same. So half base times side equals half base times side equals half base times side. We are just using different bases and heights. So now we don't care about the half, we just care about the side and the altitude. So I'm going to multiply this whole thing out by 2 to get A times h sub A equals B times h sub B equals C times h sub C. So now what can we do from here? Well, we know that A times h sub A is equal to, we know that A times h sub A is equal to 2 times the area. I'm going to let A represent the area of the triangle. We know that A times h sub A equals 2 times the area of the whole triangle. And we know B times h sub A equals 2 times the area of the whole triangle. And we can say the same thing about C times h sub C. So what does this allow us to do? Well, now we can just isolate the altitudes as follows. H sub A equals 2A over side A. Same thing over here. The altitude B is the 2 times the area over side B, and the third altitude is 2 times the area over side C. Okay, so now we can directly apply our triangle inequality theorem. So now I need more space, so we will erase our triangle here. So we have that the same thing for the other two altitudes. Now what we are going to say is that 1 over the first altitude is going to be 1 over 2a over a. Now of course you should know this is a complex fraction, so if I simplify it by multiplying it by a over a, I will get a over 2a. And if I do that for the other two altitudes, I will get 1 over h sub b equals b over 2a, and 1 over h sub c equals c over 2a. Now I can finally use my triangle inequality theorem. How? Well, as you can clearly see, a plus b is greater than c. So that means a over 2a will be greater, a over 2a plus b over 2a will be greater than c over 2a. And why is that? Well, let's come back to here. If you have a plus b greater than c and I divide both sides by 2a, that doesn't change the inequality. So in fact, if I simplify this, let's come back to here. If I simplify this, a over 2a is just 1 over ha plus b over 2a is just 1 over hb, and c over 2a is just 1 over hc. Now you might be thinking that I haven't proved the inequality, because it's asking us to prove that 1 over the first altitude is less than the sum of 1 over the second altitude and 1 over the third altitude. However, this is the exact same thing, because once you just rearrange the terms, you will find that this inequality states the exact same thing as this inequality. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my proof of the altitude theorem, and watch us next time. Subscribe to Bari Science Lab.